I was working at a tourist information desk in Rome when an American couple asked me what time the Colosseum was built, not the year, the time of day. The husband explained they wanted to visit at the exact same hour to absorb the authentic historical energy. This is the kind of international reasoning I document so you don't have to encounter it yourself. If decoding peak tourist psychology is your thing, you're already in the right place. You might as well commit. His wife was taking notes. When I explained the Colosseum took decades to complete, he asked if I could at least narrow it down to morning or afternoon construction. She suggested we look up the original contractor's schedule. I was working as a tour guide in Paris when a woman asked why French people don't simply speak English, since everyone knows it's the universal language. She said her tax dollars essentially paid for their freedom, so the least they could do was meet her halfway linguistically. When I told her French is their native language, she offered to start a petition to make English mandatory in tourist zones. She already had 67 signatures from her cruise ship. I was working at a hotel in Amsterdam when a guest demanded we turn off the canals at night, because the sound of water was keeping him awake. He claimed he was allergic to ambient water noise. When I explained the canals are permanent waterways, not decorative fountains, he asked to speak with the city's water manager. He presented a medical form from his chiropractor diagnosing him with aquatic frequency sensitivity syndrome. Most people scroll past this kind of field research. The ones who subscribe are collecting case studies in real time. This isn't entertainment. It's cultural anthropology disguised as comedy. I was working at a pub in London when an American asked if we had any food that wasn't British, because he only eats American cuisine. When I suggested fish and chips, he said fish comes from the ocean, not America. I mentioned hamburgers originated in Germany. He said that was impossible, because hamburgers are named after ham, which was invented in Texas. His confidence was total, and his geography was optional. I was working at a train station in Brussels when a woman asked why European trains don't have drive-through windows like American fast food. She explained she's a mobile learner and absorbs information better without stopping. When I said trains already move, she clarified that she meant her personal vehicle should be able to drive onto the train. She had drawn a diagram showing how her SUV could fit inside a passenger car. I was working at a museum in Berlin when a man insisted the Berlin Wall was built backwards. Walls, he said, are supposed to keep people out, not in. As an American, he explained, he understands walls. When I told him it was meant to stop East Germans from leaving, he suggested they should have built a second wall facing the other direction. He called it bilateral barrier theory. I was working at a vineyard in Tuscany when a couple asked if the wine was gluten-free because they don't consume European wheat. The wife explained that European gluten has different molecules due to older soil. When I said wine is made from grapes, she insisted all alcohol contains grain contamination. She pulled out a home gluten test and demanded to check our Chianti. The strip turned blue, which she took as proof, though it was just reacting to the wine. I was working at a gondola service in Venice when a man asked why we don't just pave the canals and turn them into roads like normal cities. He calculated it would save millions in maintenance costs. When I explained the canals are Venice's entire identity and a UNESCO site, he said that was sunk cost fallacy. He showed me a PowerPoint on his phone titled Venice Modernization Initiative, complete with ROI projections. I was working at the Eiffel Tower when a woman asked what year they planned to take it down, since it was only built for an exhibition. When I said it's been permanent since 1889, she accused us of false advertising. She demanded a refund because she specifically came to see a temporary structure. Her husband suggested suing for emotional distress caused by architectural permanence. I was working at a chocolate shop in Switzerland when a customer asked if our chocolate was made with Swiss cheese, since that's what Switzerland is known for. He believed all Swiss products should contain cheese for brand consistency. When I explained chocolate and cheese are unrelated, he argued brand diversification is inefficient. He proposed cheese-infused chocolate and pulled out a bag of shredded cheddar to illustrate his vision. The smell ended the discussion. I was working at a castle in Scotland when a family asked why the castle didn't have elevators. Since it clearly wasn't ADA compliant, The father explained his son has gravitational resistance syndrome and can't manage staircases built before 1950. When I mentioned the castle dates back to the 1200s, he said that only proved it needed updating. He threatened to report us to the International Historical Building Commission, which does not exist. I was working at a cafe in Vienna when a woman sent back her coffee 3 times because it tasted too European. She wanted it more American, which apparently means weaker and sweeter. When I offered more hot water and sugar, she said that wasn't authentic American coffee, just altered European coffee. She asked if we could import Folgers beans and rebrew it. She was willing to wait 45 minutes for shipping. I was working at the Louvre when a man complained that the Mona Lisa was smaller than expected. He accused the museum of misleading advertising. When I explained Renaissance paintings are often modest in size, he said modern audiences expect large-format entertainment. He suggested commissioning a life-sized remake and storing the original. He estimated a 38% satisfaction increase based on a survey he designed. I was working at a Greek restaurant in Athens when a customer accused us of appropriating Greek culture. He said he was 1/16 Greek and hadn't given permission. When I pointed out the restaurant was in Greece, run by Greeks, he said location doesn't determine authenticity. His great-great-grandfather was from Crete, which gave him intellectual property rights over gyros. He produced a laminated family tree. I was working at a train platform in Barcelona when a woman asked which direction the train to Italy goes. When I pointed east, she insisted Italy is south because boots point downward. When the train arrived heading east, she refused to board. She said she doesn't trust horizontal geography and is still waiting for a vertical train. I was working at a beer hall in Munich when a man asked if Oktoberfest happens every year. When I said yes, he suggested holding it every 4 years like the Olympics to increase prestige. He pitched it seriously and called it scarcity-based festival optimization. I was working at a pharmacy in Dublin when a woman asked whether Irish medicine is compatible with American blood. She claimed Americans have different immune systems due to frontier genetics. When I explained medicine is chemistry, not nationality, she showed me a blog about biological American exceptionalism. She asked if we carried freedom-based antibiotics. I was working at Stonehenge when a family asked what time the stones turn on. The daughter was crushed when I said they don't do anything. Her father demanded the light show schedule. When I explained it's an ancient monument, he suggested installing LEDs and a soundtrack. Without entertainment value, he said, it's just rocks, and that discriminates against modern attention spans. I was working at a hotel in Prague when a guest complained the city was too European and asked if there was a more American section. He wanted chain restaurants and English-only signs. When I suggested the tourist district, he said it was still too foreign. He proposed creating American-only zones to improve vacation comfort. I was working at the Anne Frank house when someone asked if Anne Frank was available for photos. When I explained she died in 1945, they asked if we had a weekend actress. They were upset there was no interactive element and suggested a meet-and-greet experience using historical reenactors. I was working at a ski resort in the Alps when a man demanded we lower the mountains because the altitude was affecting his performance. He said the elevation was false advertising. When I told him mountains can't be adjusted, he threatened a 1-star review for geographical inflexibility. He suggested excavating the peaks to create customer-friendly slopes and had already contacted a lawyer. If this level of international logic leaves you equal parts informed and concerned, stay close. I track these encounters full-time so you don't have to. Subscribe, and consider it weekly proof that satire doesn't need help writing itself. I was working at a restaurant in Lisbon when a woman asked why Portuguese food isn't just Spanish food with a different name. She said Portugal is basically Spain's younger sibling. When I explained Portugal has its own culinary traditions, she insisted that was just branding. She demanded Spanish labels on the menu because that's what Americans recognize. I was working at a bookstore in Copenhagen when a customer asked for Danish books translated into English. When I said they were already in English, he clarified he wanted them translated into American. British English, he said, has unnecessary letters. He refused to buy anything with color or favorite in it and called it dialect discrimination. I was working at a bike rental in Stockholm when a woman asked if Swedish bikes are compatible with American riding styles. Her cycling technique, developed in Ohio, might not translate. When I said bikes work the same everywhere, she requested a compatibility test. She brought her own seat, adjusted it for 20 minutes and never actually rode anywhere.